Here we see in the naked scene of the judgment, to go into the spiritual realm, the heart had to be weighed with that of the feather. Anub is balancing the judgment of Ma'at right here. We did not worship animals. They represented zoomorphic forms. And here you see Amit looking to see Tahuti writing down the deeds of Oni as he lived on earth. And Tahuti is the one that gave us writing. It's Tahuti from the spiritual mystery system. It's Tahuti who gave the great law and also gave the call that a set was going to give forth the Immaculate Conception. But let's go on to see that Haru right here has the key in order for Oni to go into the spiritual realm. As we get in Matthew's, that you must have the key to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? But yet, as he comes, and you see in the spiritual realm, all the Netarus sitting on the square. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Asar is the one who made the judgment that made 13. This is where they created their judicial system off of your African ancestral spiritual system. The 12 jurors, and also the judge makes 13, who that represented Asar. And then you also had to sit on the square. What was the square? That was the witness stand, where you had to have the makuru. You had to be truth of words in order to be on the spiritual realm, as you see like Oni make it into the spiritual realm. That also was incorporated into Christianity, where you see the 12 apostles and Jesus makes 13. This was all part of the resurrection and to be reborn again. But where do we find our African spiritual mystery system at? That means the scale of judgment and the square and the key. Let's go right on the dollar bill, and you see the scale for judgment and the key, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and the square, copied from your African naked scene of judgment, the square, 13, the key, and the judgment. Your system is here. I don't want to hear about that black stuff. I don't want to hear about Africa. No, they don't want us to open up. They're trying to suppress this knowledge, because what happens when you unlock the key, unlock the Western Masonic order, and enter the secret of your ancestral sacred knowledge, brothers and sisters? That is the key. And brothers talk about, I got the secret. You ain't got no secret. The secret is your African ancestral knowledge that you see right here. So that's why the white boys came in, Justinian, and chiseled out. They're going to talk about graffiti and defacement of America's temples and murals and so forth. Look what they did to your ancestral temples of the goddess Aset and the great god Hasaru. Why? Because your ancestors produced the first African god who gave forth of a virgin birth, the first goddess who gave forth an immaculate conception, the Sarah, the Son of God. They even tell you right here, little folk, reverence for the Egyptian goddess Isis and her son Horus, shown at your right, an Egyptian statue of the Ptolemaic period, was easily converted to the veneration of Mary and Jesus. The 4th century fresco at the far left, and a Madonna and child adorned in the Coptic monastery. They said it was easily converted. So let's see how easy it was converted. Dr. John G. Jackson, in his book, Christianity Before Christ, tells us, and even Churchward tells us. Now, let's look at Horus. Horus had 2 mothers, Isis, the virgin who conceived him, Nefertiti, who nursed him. He was brought forth singly as one of the 5 brothers. Let's look at the life of Jesus. Jesus had 2 mothers, Mary, the virgin who conceived him, and Mary, the wife of Cleophas, who brought him forth as one of her children. Brother, can you be by the lens a little bit? I mean, I don't know if you can see us out of focus. I know I can see us out of focus. Horus was the son of Seth, his father on earth. Jesus was the son of Joseph, his father on earth. Let's look at Horus now. Horus was with his mother, the virgin, until 12 years old, when he was transformed into the beloved son, the God, as the only begotten of the Father in heaven. Jesus remained with the mother, the virgin, up until the age of 12, when he left her to be about his father's business. From 12 to 30 years of age, there is no record in the life of Horus. From 12 to 30 years of age, there is no record in the life of Jesus. And Horus at 30 years of age became an adult in his baptism by Anu. Jesus at 30 years of age was made a man in his baptism by John the Baptist. Horus in his baptism made his transformation into the beloved Son, the only begotten of the Father, the Holy Spirit, represented by a bird. Jesus in his baptism is hailed from heaven as the beloved Son and the only begotten of the Father, the God, the Holy Spirit, that is represented by a dove. That's why they tell you right here, it was easily converted to veneration to the Mary and Jesus. This is your goddess Aset, waiting for you to come back home. Yeah. Waiting for you to come back and pay homage to her. Yeah. This is where the story was copied and manipulated down through the ages. In fact, she was worshipped throughout Europe during what is called the Herculaneum worship of Isis. So even throughout Europe at one time, they worshipped her. And now she's waiting for you to come back. Waiting for you to come back and pay homage to her. Waiting for you to open up your African ancestral genetic memory bank and let your story come in. What makes the European Jesus and Mary more sacred than your ancestors, Madonna and Child?
The spread of belief in the afterlife affected more than just the newly emerging middle class. Some scholars say the Book of the Dead influenced Jewish and Christian scripture.
Ancient Christianity owes a great deal to ancient Egypt for its concept of heaven. This makes sense because most of the early Christian fathers were native Egyptians. And so when documents were being written concerning the nature and substance of the afterlife, since these things were not originally written in the Bible, the ancient Egyptians sort of filled in the blanks. The idea of spending one's afterlife with your loved ones in a pleasant place where you could do what you like is the same in both Christianity and in ancient Egyptian religion.
There's even a case to be made that the Egyptian Book of the Dead influenced New Testament and Christian religious imagery.
It's very clear when we study the history of the New Testament that, in fact, their main competition for the religion of Jesus was the religion of Isis and Osiris and their child, Horus. Many of the early figurations of the Virgin Mary sitting with baby Jesus on her lap are actually based on Isis statues, where Isis is holding Pharaoh, now her symbolic son.
One of the first people to notice the connection between the Book of the Dead and the Bible was Wallis Budge.
The fact remains the Egyptians did believe in one god. Osiris, who had lived upon the earth, had suffered a cruel death and had risen from the dead. There is no doubt that certain views and religious ideas of Christian sects may be traced directly to the Egyptians.
It's interesting to see how people's ethical beliefs and religious beliefs, no matter where they are from or what century they were sort of written in, all have a great deal in common.
Now that's Wallis Budge talking about your African ancestral history. Now let's break it down. Okay. On this relief, brothers and sisters, you can see many concepts where they came in, as I said, like scavengers and picked different pieces. On this particular relief, you can see where the Western world through Judaism took a piece of a concept of the creation story from. You can see where the Greek philosophers took a concept of Greek philosophy from. And you can also see where Christianity took a concept, European Christianity took a concept from. So let's break it down. Again, carved in stone on the temple of Aset, right here on the island of Philae. It is here. It tells where the Western world literally came like scavengers and took various scenes to make up the Western world. And one of those scenes is we see that Hermes Trismegistus in Greek mythology, they literally took it from Tahuti. It is here that our ancestors had us study from the 42 books of Tahuti, representing science, law, and intelligence, who was represented as the ibis bird that you saw. We saw those little white birds that we saw come over here. So our ancestors looked at nature. We didn't worship the bird, but it was an attribute of science, attribute of intelligence. Tahuti writing down the deeds of our life on earth as we lived here. This is where the Western philosophical thought, Greeks took their concept of Hermes Trismegistus from Tahuti, now called Thought 2. So we see Judaism took God Khnum, fashioning man out of clay, and called him Jehovah. But notice the God Khnum fashioning man on the potter's wheel out of clay. This is where Judaism took a portion of this to make up their Genesis story with the Sanhedrins around 250 BC. From this relief right here of God fashioning man and woman on the potter's wheel. And they took other concepts of Atum from Heliopolis creation story, or the city of On, to make up their Adam as a man, when actually it was Atum the son. And we see European Christianity took from the goddess Isis and Horus and made up the European, again, let me express, the European version of Mary and Jesus. Copied directly from these reliefs right here. So you got Greek philosophy, where he took from Tahuti and called it Hermes Trismegistus. You got the Jehovah Genesis creation story and the Bible, where they took from Khnum, fashioning man on the potter's wheel out of clay, and they turned it into making man out of clay, Adam out of clay. And you also got Christianity right here showing Isis lactating or breastfeeding the holy child Horus, who was born of immaculate conception and virgin birth. 3 concepts just from this one relief. You see? All carved in stone. As you can see the line, one dark, one light, showing where this temple was under the water. Nobody could come back and read this. And that's why over here, if you look against this wall right here, much of it, they try to chisel it all out. But our ancestors wrote endlessly as though one day we would forget our story. One day we would not know who we are. One day that the only thing that we put on our genetic memory bank would be an alien, a conqueror's story. In our mind, our story would not be told. And that's why Justinian in the 6th century AD came in and closed these temples down, because they were copying Christianity, the theological concepts from African people. And we'll get more into that during the lecture when we have the lecture series this afternoon. I want to even go further to show you, sisters, that y'all sacred. You are goddesses. And that's the problem with the brother today, because they took that concept out of his consciousness. That's why the rap groups around there calling her the bees and stuff. Yeah. Huh? Yeah. Okay, now look. Isis holding the Ankh of life. We know what the Ankh of life now is, a symbol of her uterus, right? So here, again, I show you, showing where the holy child is coming from her womb. See the loop? That's why she's holding it, because she wants the first immaculate conception and the first holy birth is going to come from her. So she's holding the Ankh for life. Can you see it? Not too much glare there, right? That's why the Europeans, when Justinian and the boys Theodosius, they came in, they tried to chisel it out. Couldn't deal with the real immaculate conception, but they weren't talking about one immaculate conception. Our ancestors were telling us on these reliefs that every woman could produce an immaculate conception, provided that she was on the spiritual level and the man was on the spiritual level. The both of them coming together produced immaculate virgin birth, which means a clean birth. But notice they chiseled out the Ankh, the top part of it, because that represents the womb. But the other part they kept there to represent the crucifix. You see? That symbol that they didn't take or didn't chisel out was a symbol of the cross. They didn't chisel that one out. So this is another picture of Constantine. Constantine's vision of the cross, which he is pointing to this symbol, Sec Vincius. In this symbol we shall conquer. Through this symbol we shall conquer. Supposedly Constantine got the cross out on the battlefield. Another picture, but now that we know that Constantine came here, now we know where in fact Constantine got the cross from. Huh? Right off of your ancestor temples. Has nothing to do with, this is blowing here, has nothing to do with no crucifixion or human sacrifice. Europeans corrupted it. Now we have no understanding or meaning of what the cross means today. And chisel out the Ankh, which is a symbol for life.
Anybody know the actor Taraji P. Henson? Played in I Can Do Bad All By Myself. This is her grandfather, Matthew P. Henson, the first human being to stand at the North Pole. North Pole is the coldest place on earth. He set out with a group of Europeans and other folk to set out as an explorer to be the first person to stand at the North Pole. He was the first one to get there. The others didn't make it. He was the first black man to reintroduce the belief in one God in ancient Kemet. The belief in one God is African. It doesn't come from Christianity. It doesn't come from Islam. It doesn't come from the Hebrews. It comes from the Africans of the Nile Valley, the first people God put down here on earth. This is Pharaoh Akhenaten, King Tut's father-in-law. King Tut was married to one of the children fathered by Pharaoh Akhenaten and his wife Nefertari, not to be confused with Queen Nefertiti. This black man wrote a book of Psalms, the Psalms of Akhenaten, that many biblical scholars believe are the Psalms of David. They say the Psalms of David in the Bible are word for word identical to the Psalms of Akhenaten, so many people believe that the Psalms of David in the Bible were plagiarized. Does that have anything to do with your religion? Nope. We're just talking about one text that had been modified and played with. For example, in the 5 books of Moses, we know that Genesis was the last of the 5 to be written. So if it was one of the last of the 5 to be written, how could it have been the first book? Study your history. You don't have to give up your religion, but you may have to give up your version of it. Why do most African kings and queens wear a king cobra right here on the third eye? Why is the king cobra right there at the pineal gland? Because if I take your brain out of your skull, your brain will be attached to your spinal cord. The human brain is in the shape of the head of a cobra. The spinal cord is in the shape of the body of the cobra. The cobra represents African intelligence. Your intelligence is not just your brain, it is also your spine. That's where we get the spiritual chakra system. 7 vortexes that are cerebral and spinal in nature, through which the universe communicates with you. Also, the snake is a reptile. Reptiles have one of the largest pineal glands in all of creation. The pineal gland works with the pituitary to secrete the chemical that makes your skin black. So that snake also represents pride in black skin. And thirdly, the ancient Africans taught that your spirit is coiled up at the base of your spine 3.5 times. And in order for you to reach God consciousness, you have to force your spirit up through the chakras and through your pineal. Your spirit must merge with the soul of the universe, and that's how you reach God consciousness. That's why when you look at most of the kings and queens, they were often painted while they sat in their chairs with their hands on their lap, because they were in trance, in meditation. Meditation don't come from the Chinese people, and it don't come from the East Indian people. It comes from African people. They simply borrowed it. Mary and Jesus, Immaculate Conception. God impregnating a woman and giving birth to a son, that's nothing new. That story existed in Africa 20,000 years before Jesus was born. Nor was he the first famous person to wear the title Christ. Christ is a title, it's not a name. Here's the statue of the original Mary and Jesus. You got Auset, who the Greeks called Isis, Haru, which the Greeks called Horus, and Asaru, who the Greeks called Osiris. Mother, born of Immaculate Conception. God, represented as the sun. Why did the Africans use the sun to represent God as opposed to the moon and star of the Muslims, which they borrowed from the Adinkra symbolism of Ghana? Or the cross of the Christians, which they borrowed from the Ankh of Kemet? They use the sun because the whole universe revolves around the sun. There is no life without the sun, no vegetation, no water, no vitamin D that you need to activate your melanin. Without the sun, there's no life. It's the most powerful thing in the universe that we know of, and as a result of that, Africans use the sun to represent God. What did the scientists just found out a couple years ago? They said the essential substance of the universe is something invisible that we refer to as dark matter. They said every atom of dark matter has millions of universes within it. They said our whole approach to understanding the universe has been totally wrong, because you can't understand the universe without understanding dark matter.